Massive warehouse. There's nothing in there but our table. And then Steve Jobs comes walking in. Steve walks up to the table and does this. It's good. He looked at our table, he felt our table, and I became Apple's table expert.
Jay Strommen, he's the man behind the curtain.
Ultimately, we ended up being in 52 countries, 22,000 doors, just for Apple.
And that's just one of your customers.
That's just one of them. We build cool. We say yes when others have to say no. It doesn't matter which tech company you're talking about. If you're looking at one of their logos, I was probably involved. I'm going to meet with every brand that I think is doing something cool. Disney, Nordstrom, Microsoft, Nike, Nintendo. I would fly all over the country, pretending like I was already going to be in town, and I would meet with people. I walked into the head of animation at Disney, and Fred looks up from his desk and says, "What the are you selling?" And I look at him and I said, "I don't know, Fred, what the are you buying?" Either I'm going to do great things with this company or it's going to go down big. In the midst of my unhealed trauma, I accidentally built a big-ass company.
You were out on the streets at 15?
Right around 15.
So you went from living on the streets to running a global empire.
The one thing that I think really allowed me to show up the way that I show up today is
Jay Strommen, welcome to Cleared for Takeoff.
Happy to be here.
So good to have you. You built Process Displays, which, by the way, is an incredible business, known internationally to be far bigger than what you walked into. And I know that the path hasn't been easy or painless, but when you look back on your story, what do you think forged you as a leader that you sit before me today?
Great question. You know, it's interesting because as I continue to work through my attempts at being the best version of myself, I spend a lot of time looking back at this. And the one thing that I think really allowed me to show up the way that I show up today is the fact that at an early age, I had to master the art of inspiration. You know, at at 15 years old, when I'm living on the streets, my goal is to convince a buddy's parents that it would be in their best interest to give me dinner. And if I'm really good, maybe invite me to sleep over on a Tuesday night when everyone's like, "Shouldn't you be going to school tomorrow?" And I think that, you know, I look at those experiences as you know, childhood trauma, but I also look at those experiences as the first opportunity to really connect with people. And it wasn't an option to say, boy, should I talk to these people? Should I try to get a meal? You know, it was, okay, here's what I've got to do. And so you learn quickly to walk into a house and understand the power dynamics. Who's in charge here? And what does that person need to hear? And, you know, how do I connect with their inherent desire to help others? And those things, granted, at 15, I had no idea this is what I was doing. I was simply trying to get something to eat.
You're just trying to survive.
Just trying to survive.
So you were out on the streets at 15?
Starting right around 15. Yeah.
So you went from living on the streets to running a global empire.
I did. I mean, there's a number of steps along the way. Trust me, It wasn't quite as simple as that. But when you ask what gave me the ability, what was the real qualities that would allow me to lead the way I lead today, is empathy and compassion. And in order to be able to truly connect with empathy, you have to be able to sit in somebody's discomfort, not fix their discomfort, not give them a million ways to walk through it, but just to sit in it. Empathy is me sitting with you and connecting to whatever the feeling is that you have, so you feel seen. And so for me, I've had the opportunity to make some just fantastic mistakes in my life, massive mistakes in my life, that give me this incredible street cred where I can say, "Oh, you want to talk about that now?" Let me tell you how I dropped the ball in that world, but it allows me to be able to sit with people. And that started at an early age, understanding that really we all just want to be loved. We all just want to be accepted, and we all want to have a place to belong. So let me do that.
And you learned that trying to survive on the street.
I learned that trying to survive on the street. Yeah. And it's don't cry for me, Argentina. It's not like it was that hard. I mean, I lived on the mean streets of Eide, an affluent upscale suburb, but it was still, as a 15-year-old, there's no support system now.
Yeah.
There's no safety net. Even school becomes optional because what I really need to do is work, because I need to be able to pay for my life.
And you were what, 15 would have put you at like 9th or 10th grade?
Yeah, I was going into 10th grade.
So did you stop going to school?
I don't know that I had ever been a super consistent attender of education. I mean, the challenges in my life started at a much younger age. So what was important to me was different than a lot of people. And so, yeah, 10th grade, I was at school less. 11th grade, I was at school even less.
Yeah.
And it just got to the point. It was pretty clear to me, because one, it wasn't a goal, but it was pretty clear to me that I'm not going to graduate from high school. Not super important to me, not something that felt like I needed as a stepping stone to the next part of my life. It was, I need to work. I need to figure this out. I need to be able to try to build a normal life.
So as a kid, your grandfather owned this business called Process Displays.
Correct.
And so at what point did you get brought into the family business?
It's interesting because we always called it the shop. Just referred to, where are you going? Well, I'm going to the shop. And so if you had not experienced it, everyone assumed that this shop was, two dudes in a garage making some posters. And
is that what it was at the time?
No, it was not. It was a much larger business at that point. It started in the 30s as a couple of people in a garage making posters. And those couple of people were my grandfather and my grandmother and my grandfather's stepdad. So yeah, that's where it started. By the time I came in, 1990, by the time I came in, the company was 40 some years old. We had added some things on the printing side of what we do.
Was it doing big revenue by that time?
It was doing great revenue. It was a solid, well-run, profitable company.
Yeah.
So, I didn't walk into a failing business. I just walked into a business that was kind of at the beginning stages of commoditization.
Yeah.
And so what it was that we did for a living was becoming commoditized. It was not as interesting as maybe one would want for their life's pursuit. But it was a good, well-run business.
How did you decide? Because this business is your grandfather on your mom's side.
Yes.
How did you decide, I want to go work in the family business? Or were you like, this is the easiest option?
It was, my grandfather is still one of the greatest men I've ever met. And so the opportunity to be able to do what it is that he does was all that really mattered to me. He could have been a water restoration expert, and that's what I would have gone into. So it wasn't really, obviously, my education didn't prepare me for this. So it was, this is what my grandfather does. He's a great man.
Did he mentor you?
He did, in the way that a dude from that generation does, and it was 1990. I was living in Palm Springs, California. Back then in the late 80s, early 90s, there was less online connection between schools. And so if College of the Desert is listening to this, then I apologize. But I decided I was going to go to college in Southern California. And so the conversation around transcripts and high school diploma had to do with some kind of fire and mishap. And I can't get it for you, but it's a community college, so who really cares? So I went to Southern California and I took short game and putting, golf cart repair, turf management, all the necessary classes. And my grandfather gave me a call and said, it's time to go to work.
Oh.
And I'm just about to turn 20. He calls me up. I'm like, this is it. I just got called up to the show. I'm going to run a business.
So did you think you were just going to like walk in and run?
100%. I was so sure that I was going to walk in with this wealth of knowledge I had created in my 6 months at junior college, that I was going to walk into this business and I'm taking over.
Yeah.
Like, it's go time.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, that's not what happened. But I did. I moved up to Minnesota. I got paid $10 an hour to work on one of the assembly lines. And that was the beginning. And it was, I remember, because the guy in charge of operations, Jim was his name, and Jim went to my grandfather and said, look, can we just pay Jay to stay home? Because the dude's just in the way. And my grandfather said, no, but I'll pay you to train him. So
what a moment.
Yeah. Yeah, that was.
Why do you think he wanted to do that? I mean, I know a lot of business owners would not do that with their family just to keep it.
I think my grandfather was family first. That was the way he built that business. That's why he built that business. And that's just the way he lived his life.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think at that point in my life, he saw the potential in me that I hadn't quite seen yet.
Yeah.
And he knew that I could control a room. He knew that I could get people excited about something. And so he knew that at some point, either I'm going to do great things with this company or it's going to go down big, you know? And that was really what he bet on.
So how long did you work in the business before you moved into a place to go, I'm going to be the show?
You know, it was 1990. My grandfather was, let's see, he would have been 80 years old. So you're for sure thinking this is transition. The dude's 80. Like, how long is he going to work? I then worked with him for the next 12 years.
Holy smokes.
And it was.
So he was 92?
92. Yeah. 92, the day he worked until the day he died.
Wow.
92 years old.
That's kind of the dream, I think.
Yeah, it was amazing. But in that process, you asked, did he mentor me? You know, what I got from my grandfather a lot was things like, love your pants, didn't know the circus was in town, you know, or I'd walk by and I hadn't shaved and he'd be like, how much do you need to buy a razor? You know, I mean, those were the kind of things that he would say to me.
Just old school grandpa.
Yeah. I mean, constantly, that's a great shirt. Do they make it in your size? You know, like those were the kind of things I would get from him. And that was at the beginning. And I really realized that's him just making this comfortable. Like, hey, don't make this bigger than it is. Like, just get comfortable with the environment you're in, and we'll continue to go from there. And it was never laid out like, Jay, here's what we're going to do. The first 4 years of your career are this, the next 4 years are this, then you'll do this, and eventually you do this. That was never made clear. So I started with, wow, some of this stuff that we're doing seems really old. Hey, Gramps, why don't we buy a new piece of equipment? And he would just be like, we're not doing that. Go back to work. I'm like, okay. And then I would go back and think of something else I wanted to do, and I would bring it into him, and he would say, we're not doing that. Go back to work. And that happened for a number of years. And I remember this so clearly. I walked into our controller at the time, did all the finances. And at the time I'm making, I don't know, maybe I'm up to $15 an hour now. And I walk into him and I said, hey, I was really hoping that we could talk about my compensation. I'd like to make more money. And he just looks at me and he says, we're happy where you are right now. And that was the end of the conversation. And I'm like, who's we? Who did you just check with in your head? You know, I mean, like, but that's the way the company was run. And so what happened over the time is I was able to work in one department. And then as we were having someone who was going to retire from another department, put Jay in there, let him figure that out. And I had the opportunity to work through every part of our business over about a 10-year period. And over that 10-year period, it went from, we're not going to do that, go back to work, to, why do you think that would be a good idea? To, if you think that's going to work, let's try it. You know, and that was kind of the arc of the mentorship. And it wasn't called out and it wasn't straightforward, but it was close your mouth for a while and figure out what we do.
But I mean, to me, I hear this and I'm like, you're really young. you're in your 20s now.
Yep.
You had an unusual amount of patience for a 20-year-old. What made you so patient to go through this? Did you see glimmers of change and growth, or were you just like hard-headed and you're like, oh,
You know, it was really part of it is not wanting to let my grandfather down.
sure.
And then part of it is when you're at that company, or I would hope most companies, but when you're there for a period of time and you start to meet the people and get to know the people. When I first started, I was working on the back of a press, just racking things, meaning you're just pulling it off and putting it in a rack every time it dries. And I'm working with another guy who's about my age. And I said to him, man, don't you want more out of life?
Mm.
Like, you're not even dawning on me that, hey, I'm a racker too, just like you. But it was, don't you want more out of life? Like, don't you want bigger than this? And he was like, you know, Jay, I make a good living. This is stable work. And I like the people that I work with.
So you had an inherent hunger in you.
Yeah, I always wanted to be bigger.
Did you, like, since you can remember?
You know, I don't, I think we've talked about this before, but I don't have a lot of memories of my childhood before 15. It was a pretty traumatic experience. I don't have a lot of memories before 15, but what I remember is never feeling, at the time, I would say never feeling content or never slowing down to smell the roses. Ultimately, what it is just incredible lack of self-worth.
Mm.
And if I make enough money, or if I'm powerful enough, you're going to respect me. You're going to love me. I'm going to be okay.
Yeah.
And so I don't know this consciously that this is why I'm building it, but that's what's ticking in the background constantly. Like, hey, you're not good enough. You're not good enough. You're not good enough. And it's like, oh yeah, you want to see what not good enough can do?
Sure. Like, I'll do whatever I got to do.
Yep. Let me
That's
show you what
interesting.
that looks like.
When you, obviously, to develop that level of desire to prove yourself, you had to have some things that made you feel like you didn't have value.
You know, I think that it's when you grow up in an abusive house and there's not a lot of safety there, there's not a lot of stability there, and it's really almost like failures get celebrated. It's not like you're throwing a party, but it's the kind of thing, you know, when you've done something wrong and every time you see this certain person, they want to remind you of that thing you did wrong. They're like, oh gosh, remember that time, Charles, when you were so dumb and you said yes and the answer was no, and you just continue to have to relive that. And it's a small thing, and on its own, it just kind of goes away. But when someone continues to bring up your failures to you, you start to connect to these failures. You know, you start to feel like, well, these failures they might even define me, because this is what we talked about. You know, this is what's important to you. The time I failed and did this. Or remember the time that you spray painted the high school and the police showed up at the house? Yeah, of course I remember that. You know, remember the time you got arrested for grand theft? Yep, remember that too. You know, these are the things that continue to get brought up. And so you start to believe that I'm not worthy. There's nothing that I can do that will be good enough. And so along those lines, you just start to find, I mean, in our culture, it's pretty easy. You know, well, how do I define good enough? Well, you got to be rich and you got to be powerful.
Yeah.
You know, maybe have an Instagram with a few yachts and a Mercedes. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
like, that's how we define it. You know, when you look at successful, I've never heard anyone say to me, you know what? That Gandhi was so successful. No, because we define success as power and money. Gandhi might have been really effective. He might have done a lot of good things, but no one talks about him as successful. So when you talk to people and say, well, how did you get to be such a successful businessman? You're saying, how'd you get to be so rich? How'd you make so much money? How'd you get so much power? So those are the metrics that I'm looking at, even at a young age, saying that's what I need to do.
When at what point did you decide, I'm not going to let these failures that I keep getting reminded of define who I am? Like, there had to have been a moment.
Yeah, there was a moment, but that moment was much later than one would have thought.
Really?
You know, I mean, I think that moment happened in the last 10 years.
Whoa.
You know, and probably more powerfully in the last 5 years. And there is, you know, the one of the ironic things about my high school career is that in the state, and I'm not sure if it's still this way, but in the state, you get your tax allocation on students based on the students you have in the beginning of the year. Hey, how many kids do you have in homeroom class? There's your tax allocation. So every year, Eide would invite me back to school, even though credit-wise, like I shouldn't be out of 8th grade. I'm back at 10th grade, and part of it, I think, was, hey, let's get them out of our school and make them someone else's problem, but I don't know that for sure. But they would invite me back the beginning of every year. So the beginning of every year, my junior year, I think it was my junior year, they had a work release program. So the second half of the day, you could go to like a Votech and take cabinet making. And then the first half of the day, you would take classes. And I'm like, this is genius. Only I didn't sign up for the second half of the day. I just told them that's what I was going to do. So I signed up for a couple of classes in the morning, and then I would leave, and they're like, oh, he's going to Votech. I'm not going to Votech. I just left. And then eventually got expelled, which is was the thing that happened every year. But I come back my senior year, and I'm talking to a friend of mine, and there's a dance that happens early in the year. And I said, who are you going to take to the dance? And he said, oh, I'm either going to take this person or that person. And I'm like, who's the second one? I've never heard of her. And he's like, oh, that's her over there. And then I was like, oh, got it. And I've been married to that girl for 34 years, which is, you'll have to excuse me, and my kids, my family know this. I have a hard time talking about my wife or my kids without getting emotional, because she is the single biggest factor in my success. To be where I am today required at some point, because you asked when was that moment, required at some point to not only understand, but feel what true love and support feels like. To feel what unconditional acceptance feels like. Now, it doesn't mean that she always agrees with me, and it doesn't mean that she doesn't tell me what she thinks sometimes, but she doesn't judge me as a person because of an action. She doesn't judge me as a person because of something I said. And so that, for me, was the beginning of the opportunity to say, oh, wait a minute. I'm bigger than the things I do. I'm bigger than the things I say. And that was ultimately where I started to be able to say, okay, well, how do I show up then? How do I show up as the best version of myself?
And that was because of your wife.
And that was because of my wife. Yeah. And that was, and there is it may be for a different podcast, but my relationship with my wife, I mean, there is no reason she's still married to me. She should have left me a number of times and could have done way better. But that's not the way she works. When the wheels would come off, she would look at me and say, you're sick and you need to get help. And always had the ability to separate the actions from the actor. These actions are unacceptable. I will not be in a marriage that has actions like these, but the actor's okay.
She sounds like a patient saint.
She's got a special place in heaven, I'll tell you that. You're married to me for that long, and then you raise 4 of my kids, and 2 of them are boys. Like, you got a special place in heaven.
So it sounds like you attribute a lot of your life success to her.
My ability to show up the way that I show up today is a result of experiencing those things. And some of those things, hopefully, people experience as a child. You have parents and they love you, and you make a mistake and they still love you. And those are things that are ingrained in people as small children as you're growing up. And that wasn't the case in our household. So I didn't know those things. So what I learned, and as I'm building this business, what I learned is if I want to get somebody to do something, it's thought, emotion, action. You're going to have a thought, you attach a strong enough emotion to it, you're going to take action. So I can either help shape the thoughts that you have, which is challenging, or I can help steer the emotions you have, a little bit more doable, to reach the actions that are required to do whatever it is I'm trying to do. So if I can get you to think, well, this poor guy really needs a meal, and if I can attach to the heartstrings and you feel a certain amount of compassion for, boy, that must be a tough time for him, and we'd really like to be able to, I would feel good if I could help him with this. That's the emotion you attach to it. Now the action is pretty simple. You thought, poor guy, you felt, how do I help? You know, a certain amount of sadness and compassion. The action is going to be, what do you want for dinner?
It sounds so natural to what you do as a company, right? I mean, in mass, at scale, you do that very thing.
Exactly.
So how did this go from you making $10 or $15 an hour to you buying the business from your grandfather and defying the odds, which, by the way, you told me it's something like 70% failure rate on a third generation. And it skipped a generation. Your dad wasn't involved.
No second generation.
Mom wasn't
second generation worked there for a while, but never in leadership. And so businesses that go from first to third generation, 75% of them fail. This was
no matter the size, doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
So
because there's usually such a disconnect from, I founded this business because of these values and these passions. And then you've got the grandkids in there saying, my grandpa's rich and look at all this stuff and I want to have a Cadillac, you know? And so there's just this disconnect in what it is. And our grandfather, it wasn't just me, it was my two brothers and myself. And our grandfather sold us the business as cheap as the IRS would let him. Because he's like, I'm not going to give you anything.
Why do you think he didn't give it to you? I mean, aside from the IRS.
Yeah, he was the Great Depression generation. You know, he fought in World War II. He understood the value of earning something. I think he also understood the value of discovery. You know, I can tell you something, but when you discover that, it's so much more powerful and lasting.
Do you think we get that wrong now these days? I mean,
yeah,
you see a lot of that.
Yeah. I think that we have a lot of people who want to teach and not a lot of people who want to share. And I think what happens is when I'm going to teach you something, that puts me in the mindset of I know something you don't know, or I'm right in something and you're wrong. And so that intention behind why am I sitting with you right now? I'm not here to teach you anything. You know, I'm here to share with you as someone that I respect and that I care for and that I've seen do great things in the world. How do I share what I know with you? You know, and that was, my grandfather believed that this is either going to make it or it's going to fail based on you guys.
So fast forward, you end up buying the business. Where was the business at the time? And tell me about some of those big breaks you had along the way.
It was a great business. And that's where I really had a leg up. You know, we had good financials. It wasn't, you know, it did about 30 million in revenue. And we had just under 90 employees, and we were really good printers. Screen printing, digital printing, offset printing. So he had built a really good foundation. Now we were on the high end of the market. You know, we weren't selling Chevys, we were selling Mercedes. And if you needed a Mercedes, you called us. If you needed a Chevy and you called us, you complained about our price. Like, that's just kind of the way it went. So
I can relate.
Yeah. So we knew we were good at what we did. The challenge was that was enough to sustain my grandfather. And this is a guy who didn't take a paycheck till he was in his 70s. You know, so it's not like he made a ton of money at it. You know, like he made a ton of money in his life from 70 to 92. You know, that's when the business was really doing well. Well, then the three of us step in and you look at the numbers and you're like, this isn't going to support 3 growing families.
So it was you and your two brothers.
My 2 brothers. Yep.
Okay.
And my older brother, who's passed away in 2018, was the polar opposite of me. Like Pete and I lived our lives on opposite ends of the Myers-Briggs test. You know, it's that kind of deal. Like, here's his personality, here's mine. And it was a perfect marriage of being able to bring in the, you hold it, I'll light it. And he's is this really the right thing to do? And so, and my little brother sat kind of right in the middle of that. And so it was a really good team to go out there, and we bought it in the late 90s. No idea that I was signing my name on this massive loan that I was personally responsible for. Just had no challenge, no issue with risk at all in my life, and unfortunately haven't in most of my life.
That probably played to your advantage a little.
It absolutely did.
Because you didn't know the gravity of what you were signing.
Like so much so that I don't even mention it to my wife.
Really?
I don't think that I need to tell my wife that I just signed away our name on this multi-million-dollar loan that we have 10 years to pay back. But that's what we did. And we looked at it at that point and said, okay, how are we the best versions of ourselves? And in 2002, my grandfather passed away, 92 years old. I'd been there for 12 years now. Both of my brothers had been there between 5 and 10 years, so they've got some time as well. And 2002, we look at each other and we're like, what are we going to do?
Because he had just passed away.
He had just passed away, and we were printers, and we needed to figure out what does the next step look like. And this is when I said, hey, look, I'm just going to go and meet with every brand that I think is doing something cool. And so I had a guy that still works with us, a guy that works with us who was just amazing at getting on the phone and getting meetings. And so I said, here's what I want you to do. We have nothing to sell. These are people that should not meet with us, but you're going to call them up, say, we're going to be in town next week. We're so impressed with the work that you do in the retail environment. Can we just pick your brain for 30 minutes? And so he started doing that. Disney and Nordstrom's and Microsoft and Nike and Nintendo. And I would fly all over the country pretending like I was already going to be in town. And I would meet with people and I would sit down with them and I would ask 2 questions. I mean, we would talk about a bunch and I would make sure they understood I have nothing to offer you. And I'm just here as a fan, really, because I love what you guys are doing. And then I would ask them, in a perfect world, what would you be able to do next year that you couldn't do this year? No fault of your own. What did you want to do this year that you just couldn't do? And then they would say, oh my gosh, well, because so-and-so doesn't understand this, or so-and-so can't get their job done, or whatever the excuses were. They would say, I really want to be able to do this. I really wish we could do this. And then I would fly home and I would write that stuff down and I would sit with my brothers and I would say, okay, here's some gaps in the market. Market needs 1, 2, and 3. And then I'd go fly, see someone else, and they'd say something else. And I just kept doing that. And we would rewrite, I wish that I had them, we would rewrite our brochure probably every month and a half. And we'd print a new one because we were printers. And I'd bring that one out to the field and see how that one worked. And it didn't work. And this landed and that didn't land. And we kept doing that for probably a year and a half. And over that period of time, I just formed some relationships. The guy at Nordstrom's who was in charge of all the front windows and visual merchandising, I never sold him anything, but I would meet with them and we had a relationship and I would help him solve problems. I'd say, hey, Russ, what are you working on? Oh, I got to figure out a motor that moves an umbrella so we can sell rain gear in the spring. I'm like, oh, have you thought of this or thought of that? And he'd be like, oh, that's a great idea. And then he'd buy it from someone else. And that happened for a couple of years as I'm kind of figuring out, here's what the industry needs, and looking at it saying, can we add value to this gap?
And building a relationship.
Yeah.
What made you want to do that?
Part of it was I didn't want to just sell printing. I didn't want to get involved. If one of the first couple questions you ask me is, how much does it cost? I lose interest quickly. I don't want to be fighting with something because of cost. I want to be talking about impact. What are you trying to do? What do you want your clients to feel when they walk into this environment? Of course, what it costs matters, and that's important. But if that's the first couple of things that come out, I'm like, you should call one of my competitors. Because that's what they focus on.
Did you just naturally have that ability to be like...
I was not the brightest bulb on the tree, Charles, and I went out there not knowing that at some point, hey, Jay, you're actually going to have to sell something to support the business. I was just out there saying, what does greatness look like?
Yeah. And you had posture without knowing it. Where
right.
you were like, cost.
I was
I'm losing interest.
right. I was willing to walk in and take a shot at it, you know. And it was, and I'll tell you, when I walked into the head of animation at Disney, and you can censor this out, but I walk into the head of animation at Disney, and his name was Fred. I won't give away his last name, but I walk in and Fred looks up from his desk. He looks right at me and he goes, "What the fuck are you selling?" Never met this guy before in my life. Someone had introduced me to him and said, "You should really meet with Fred. He's a very powerful guy." And he looks right at me and says, "What the fuck are you selling?" And I look at him and I said, "I don't know, Fred, what the fuck are you buying?" And we started a 10-year relationship. And he laughed and laughed. And I said, "You know, I don't sell a widget. You know, I don't really go on sales calls at all, Fred. I'm in the service business. So if I can't add value to what you're trying to do, then I'm wasting your time and mine, because it's not transactional to me." Because now, again, go back into my past. This is about, I need to be powerful, doing great things so I feel good enough about myself.
Yeah.
The money, yeah, okay, fine. I can buy a nice car. I can do things like that. But unless I'm going to walk around with my ATM receipt taped to my shirt, no one's going to know how much money I have. So I need something bigger than that. I need, like you said, I need to have this kind of aura that I walk around where people are like, "Man, that guy's powerful." And so that's where things started for me. And as I was flying around the country, finding out really where the business needed help, and my brothers were incredibly supportive and more operationally minded than me. And, you know, we're able to kind of keep everything afloat while I'm out here, you know, kind of blue sky in this thing. And so it was over that period of time that my buddy at Nordstrom's, Russ, who I would see every couple of months over a couple year period, calls me up and says, "Hey, Jay, I just took a new job at Apple and you got to get down here. Like, this is messed up." And I was like, "Oh, I would love that. That'd be great, Russ. Thanks." So he invites me to come down and present to Apple. This is 2005. I put on my best suit. I still wore suits back then. I put on my best suit and grabbed my Sony laptop, and off to Apple I went. I walk in and they're like, "Are you here to fix the copier?" And I'm like, no, I have a meeting with Apple. They're like, "Okay, well, don't ever wear a suit here because it looks like you're here to fix the copier." I'm like, "Okay, got it." And I sit down in this meeting and I open up my Sony laptop and everybody shakes their head. They're like,
Because it's a Sony.
Because it's a Sony, because that's all that I had. And the head of procurement for Apple says, "Why you?" And his name's Ted. And I'll never forget Ted, because he was the guy that when he came to tour our facility, kept pulling on the sign on the outside of the building. "Who really owns this building?" I'm like, "We do." He just wanted to make sure the sign was attached. But Ted said, "Why you?" And then Russ jumps in. I don't even have to answer. Russ jumps in. And Russ answers why process displays. And he said, "You know, these guys are just super consistent, effective, big thinkers." And this is coming from a guy who I've never done a job for. I've had a relationship for a couple of years. We've solved a bunch of problems together, but I've never sold him anything. And so this is the way he describes us to his new coworkers at Apple. And that was the beginning of it. And they said, "Well, Jay, here's what we're trying to do. We're having a problem with this project." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, I think we can do that." And so in 2005, 2004, our company is a large printing facility and this really small signage company that my grandpa had bought in the 80s. And it was the kind of thing that like would make a frame for a poster we're printing, or would make little wood trays or things like that. So we had 4 guys that worked in there, and we had a little hand router thing and a little paint booth that kind of looked like this, and you'd spray paint in it. And so, you know, we knew fixtures just at a very different level. And Apple was in 2005, Steve Jobs said to the marketing communication team, the Marcom team, he said, "You can use Maple outside of the Apple store. Our iconic Maple table can be used outside of the Apple store." Everybody got excited. They're like, "Oh my gosh, we're going to make shop in shops all over the world. This is so great. We're going to really blanket the country with this Apple brand."
You're saying, like, if you walk into Best Buy,
If you walked
you're
into
allowed
a Best
to
Buy, yeah,
have
or back then there wasn't a phone yet, but AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, Best Buy, Target, Walmart had shops, Fnac, Carrefour and Warehouse, all over the world. It was really all over the world.
Did you ever meet Steve?
I was about this close to him twice, but no, we never had a real conversation. But it was 2005, Apple turns to me and they said, Jay, can you build the Apple table? And I'm like, of course I can build the Apple
So
table.
you're talking about the maple table that's in the Apple store.
Exactly.
They're saying, can you build this table?
Exactly.
So we can put it in other places.
Right. There's one company in the world that was doing it at that point out of Salt Lake City. They had no capacity. They couldn't build more than they were already building. And they had a different mindset than we did.
And you, at the time, couldn't either.
Well, I would say I hadn't. I don't know if I would say I couldn't, but yes, you're
but you
correct.
hadn't been, you didn't have the capacity either.
I had never built a table. Yes, to answer your question. So I come back after that meeting with Apple. Hey, Jay, can you build a table? Of course we can build a table. I don't even know at this point that I should have asked for drawings. Like, I don't know that I should have said, hey, yeah, can you send me drawings of what it is you want me to build? Or maybe just measurements? I didn't ask for anything because I had never built a table before. But I'm like, table? Yeah, I eat at a table quite often. How hard can that be? We can build a table. And I fly back and I've got 4 employees and I go to the 4 employees and I'm like, hey, Dick, can you build a table? No, we don't build tables. Bill, can you build a table? No, I don't do tables. Kevin, can you build a table? Yeah, we're not set up for tables. Chris, can you build a table? Yeah, I can build a table. Awesome. Get in my car. We're going to the Apple store. I'll keep them busy. You crawl around the table and figure out how to build it.
So wait a minute. So you guys go visit an Apple store?
There's an Apple store in Southdale here. So we drive to Southdale. And I'm talking to the guy about, they didn't sell phones.
You're distracting him.
I'm just distracting him. And Chris is consistently dropping things so he can get down on the floor and look up at the table and look over at the corners and figure out what this thing is.
And they had no idea why you were there?
No idea. No idea. They had no idea. And so then Chris is like, I think I got it. And, we take some measurements and, it's part of it's ballparking and kind of eyeballing, but we get close enough. And then Chris says to me, you should really ask him for drawings. And I'm like, oh, that's smart. Let's do that. We didn't even have a draftsman at this point. So when I called them and said, hey, do you guys have drawings? They're like, no, we can't get the drawings. I'm like, oh, yeah, that's no big deal. Don't worry about it. We'll do it. And so Chris builds me a table. And I call a temp service and I say, do you guys have drafters that I can get from a temp service? And they're like, yeah, we have a drafter. I'm like, great, send me over a drafter. I don't even know what a drafter does, but so I get this drafter to draw this table that Chris has built. And then I fly Apple to Minnesota and they come into this warehouse and there's 4 dudes and a spray paint can booth. And they're like, this is amazing. How did you build this thing?
Because they provided you nothing.
They gave us nothing. And so they're like, how did you build this table? And I'm like, oh, we have multiple facilities. So the crews kind of work between different facilities. And so, we've got a great team of people, but, we're really proud of this table. And they're like, great.
How big was this table?
It's 4 foot by 8 foot.
Okay.
Much. A standard solutions table, they call it.
But basically like kind of a copy of the table.
It is an exact copy of the table. Now, because we didn't know how that table was built, it actually is built nothing like the original tables were built.
Did you get the color right too?
We got the color right. Yeah, we were able to, it was maple back then. Now it's oak, but it was maple back then. And so we got the color right and we got the finish right. And, we were able to get this thing built. And they said, great, ship it to Cupertino. And I'm like, oh, okay. So we send it to Cupertino and it goes in this massive warehouse where there's nothing in there but our table. And it's Chris and myself and a couple other people. And we set this thing up and then we kind of stand back. And then Steve Jobs comes walking in. And Steve walks up to the table and he's got 4 or 5 people around him. Steve walks up to the table and does this. It's good. And then he walks away. And that was the extent of it. He felt our table. He looked at our table. He felt our table. He said, it's good. And I became Apple's table expert. Like, that's how quickly that happened. And so they're like, awesome, Jay, you're approved to build tables. This is so amazing. And I go back to Chris and we have a conversation. I'm like, okay, Chris, how many tables do you think you can build? And he's like, I think I can do a table a week. And I'm like, okay, all right, good. We can do that. And I go back to Apple and I said, what do you guys want to do with this? And they're like, well, we're going to build one store in Arizona in a Best Buy. We want to build a shop. And I said, great. And they said, we're going to need 4 tables and a big black wall. And I'm like, yeah, wall's no problem. Again, never built a wall in my life, but a wall's no problem. You want a monitor in there, and then you want Apple lit logos with a custom light value? Yeah, we can do all that. Don't worry about it. Come back to Chris, and I say, Chris, here's the deal. We got to build 4 tables for this shop, and they're going to do another shop right down the street, and that's 2 tables. Okay, no problem. 6 tables. We got a couple of months. We can get this thing done. We build them. We go to install it. And at the time when I'm going to install it, I'm on Google or whatever the Yahoo, whatever the browser was in 2005. And I've never installed anything in my life. And I have a banner ad for an installation company come across. And I'm like, sweet. And I click on that and I call them up and I'm like, do you guys do installation? And they're like, heck yeah, we do. Not knowing that it's literally some dude answering in his basement in Blaine, Minnesota, but that's what it was. And I'm like, great, here's what I got. Can you help me with this? And so all of this is happening as a result of me building a relationship with people, with me being able to get you to feel comfortable about what it is that we're doing. Because, when 4 Apple dudes walk into a building that has literally no employees and not a tenth of the equipment that would be required to build tables, and they walk out, you're our table guy, there's something else at play there. There is a relationship. There is a certain amount of comfort there where they're like, if Jay said he's going to do it, that dude will do it. And that was kind of what we had built off of. And, fast forward, there was an investor call that May of 2006, and Tim Cook, who was the COO at the time, is on the investor call, on the shareholder call, and says, we're going to put 400 shops in 400 Best Buys this year. And we believe that will increase revenue. It was like 400 to 600 million in first-time buyers. Because you're going to the Apple store, you want an Apple. But you're going to Best Buy, you just know you want a laptop. And so if I can give you an experience that would show you that this Apple laptop is far better than the Sony one I owned, then you're going to have first-time buyers. And that both Tim and Steve knew early on that if I can get you in the ecosystem, I got you. Because eventually we're going to be selling services or we're going to be selling products that a lot of people are going to have. So get in the ecosystem. So Tim has that call. Apple comes back to me and they say, Jay, we are going to need to do 50 shops a month. I'm like, okay. So that's going to be, let's just call it roughly 12 shops a week.
50 shops a month. So that's 200 tables a month.
That's roughly 200 tables a month.
200
tables a month.
Tables a month.
And so I come back to Chris, who's told me he can for sure build 1 table a week. And I say, Chris, here's the deal. The good news, we get to do 50 tables a week. And on top of that, we're going to do like 15 of these massive walls. And they added another piece, a bar. So let's figure out how to build a bar. So we're going to do 200 tables. We're going to do 15 bars, and we're going to do 15 walls every week.
Hold on. So Chris is making 1 table a week, and you say, Chris, good news. We're going to do 50 tables a week and a bunch of other stuff.
Yeah.
What does Chris say?
Chris kind of shakes his head, and he looks at me like I'm crazy. And then he says, here's what I need. And we go to work.
So you're obviously hiring.
So we're hiring, we're buying equipment, we're doing everything that we need to do to be able to figure this out. And we're learning as we go. Like he would build a table and be like, no, there's an easier way to build it. Or if we use this aluminum substructure, we'll take out weight and it'll be more stable. I mean, all of these things that we learn as we're building these tables. And in the meantime, the company itself, Process Displays itself is a printing company. So we sit in a management meeting early on in this conversation, my grandfather had set up, as much as he trusted his 3 grandsons, he had set up a management team because we're 3 dudes in our 20s. And based on this decision, obviously one of us is a little crazy. So, we've got our company lawyer and our controllers in there, and a couple of key players at the business are in this meeting, and there's 8 of them. And we're sitting, it's me and my 2 brothers and these other 5 guys. And I said, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to build tables. And they're like, you're nuts. We don't know how to build tables. That level of exposure will ruin us. You don't know what it's going to take to put them out in the field. We'll never be able to keep up with this. I mean, there was a million reasons why we should not build tables. And
after you'd already said we're doing it.
Yeah, after I'd already said we're doing it. And they had a million other reasons on why we should just lower our price and sell more print. And so my brothers and I look at them and said, we appreciate your service. You're no longer needed. Oh. And that was the last. They all stayed as employees, but that was the last meeting we ever had. And I looked at my brothers and I said, we can do this. Like, we got this. And they were 100% on. Great. What's it going to take? And I said, here's what it's going to take. And we went to work. And that.
How many people did you have to hire?
We went from 90 employees to about 350.
Wow.
And we went from, really what was 1.5 buildings to 7.
Whoa.
And it was the kind of deal where we're like, in our mind, my brothers and I, when we're looking at this, sure, the excitement is, this is Apple. And I'll never forget, I'm standing in the Las Vegas airport, and I had just been at a show or something, and this is 2006, and on top of that, it's like, oh, hey, Jay, how much would a shop cost? I'm like, oh, well, what do I traditionally charge for a table? I don't know. I've never sold a table before. I don't know. What do we think it should cost? And so we figure out some pricing, and I put it together, and I get it to Apple, and they want to buy their first 100 shops or something like that, and they're going to do POs.
And you say quarter. Shop, that's like the environment.
Yeah, that's the environment.
With the table and the wall, and okay.
Yep, table, wall. It actually ended up being carpeting, table, wall, bar, graphics, some lighting. So there was a bunch to it. And we were kind of involved in all of that. But so I'm in the Las Vegas airport, and I get a call from Russ, and he's like, hey, I'm about to release this PO to you. It's $40 million. And I'm like, the year before we did 35 million as a company, and I just sold one job. That's $40 million. Yeah. And I'm thinking to myself, how do you even get that done? Like, what does that even look like? We're going from a company that sells $50,000 jobs to a $40 million job, and it was just, I called my wife. I was flying home anyways, but I called my wife, and of course immediately start crying. So now I'm crying in the Las Vegas airport with everyone else who lost money. And my wife is like, just, come home. And it was that moment, and it was brief, but it was that moment where I understood a little bit of the risk, where I was like, oh man, I just sold a job that's more than our yearly revenue. And this is only a quarter of the job. It's going to go over a period of time. And that's where we looked at it and said, okay, great. Everything that we're doing here, everything that I'm doing to try to build this relationship that is expanding our capabilities, as long as we believe that that's in alignment with these gaps that we're trying to fill in the market, then we're golden. So if I learn how to build a table here for Apple, and I perfect the art of building a table for Apple, when I go over here and Polaris says to me, we want to put tables in our dealerships. Oh, well, I'm a better company for it. I can say, yeah, we can do that for you. And that's really ultimately where we end up going, is saying, great, I'm going to use Apple as kind of my guinea pig and say, if Apple asks for it, we're going to do it, and we're going to figure out how that makes us a better company. And that's kind of where we went. And Chris went from, Chris was the low man on the totem pole when I came to him, which is why I came to him last of the 4 guys. He was the newest and the low man on the totem pole. And ultimately he came to run all of operations for us. So that for me that was the moment when we looked at it and said, oh, wow, we can make a lot of money doing this. We can build a big company doing this, and we can have a lot of fun doing this, and that's where it started to click. And so that's roughly 2005 is where that really started to move for me.
And since then, you've been building their tables ever since.
Yeah, and since then we've been building their tables along with a whole bunch of other people. I mean, along with every product launch.
I mean, not to mention that resume builder, where it's like, right. I mean, any other company in the world says, well, if he's doing it for Apple,
right?
So, also product launches, right? You just got done releasing the iPhone 17,
correct?
Yeah. In the Manhattan.
Yeah, we did a number of stores, but Fifth Avenue was kind of the big showcase store. So if you Google that store, or if you just happen to look at the Tim Cook interview with Jim Cramer in the store, he's standing in front of the sculptures we built, which are in front of the 30-foot long solid acrylic table and 30-foot long solid metal table that we built to go with it.
Yeah.
And again, that's just another result of, hey, Jay, can you do this? And we look at it and go, yeah, we can do that.
Yeah, and they knew you weren't BSing them.
Yep.
They knew you were actually going to do it. Yep. And that changed your entire life.
And that changed the entire trajectory of the company. That bought me some time as a person, because now all of a sudden Steve Jobs rubbed a table and said it's good, so I'm some kind of table expert. So that gives me a little bit of
I was going to say, I was like, I had this look on my face when you were explaining that when you walked in, because I'm thinking to myself, that was literally a specific instant in time where your entire life changed. Yep. When he touched your table and said, this is it.
Yeah.
And it could have gone the other way.
Absolutely.
You could have had it wrong.
And I said that,
in fact, with Steve Jobs, probably more likely you did have it wrong. Yes. And you didn't.
Yep. And let's be clear, that was not me. I mean, that was a group of people that came together that built this. Like, I couldn't have built a table on my own. No. I didn't sell Steve on it. We provided an opportunity for him to buy.
Yeah.
But we didn't do any selling. And the second time, I said that I met him twice. The second time I met him, we were sitting about this far apart in Cafe Max, which is their big cafeteria. And he was sitting with Johnny Ives and I was sitting with someone else. And this was this was 2007, 8, because the iPhone was out. And you could get these custom phone rings, like where when your phone would ring, it would be like a song. And that was super cool back then. It was before Apple Music was all tied in. And I had a phone ring that was Sir Mix-a-Lot's I Like Big Butts, but with different words. Like, pick up the phone, you're getting a call. And so my phone's sitting on the table and my ringer was on full volume and someone called me and Sir Mix-a-Lot starts going and Steve and Johnny Ive do. That was my second meeting with Steve. Yep, that was it. Thankfully, he didn't know who I was there either. But you're right. It could have gone a number of different directions. And there's still, in our career, that was the first, but that happens to us on a pretty regular basis. The work that we do is hard. We work on the razor's edge. You don't call us when it's easy. You don't call us when you have 9 months. You call us when you have a new product that has to hit the market right, when you have an opportunity to create an experience for a group of people. That's when you call.
Well, and when you think about a product launch nationally, most of us don't put the math together that when these brands drop a product and it's on a day at a time, nationwide or internationally, like that's a lot of locations to be deploying something overnight.
Yes.
And you do it.
They launched the Beatles came onto iTunes. This was probably a decade ago, but it was a big deal that they were getting the Beatles on iTunes. And part of that negotiation, again, I wasn't part of it. What I've been told is a part of that negotiation between Steve and Paul McCartney and Ringo was, hey, wherever we sell the digital album, back then you sold these plastic digital albums, wherever we sell the digital album, we'll have a little display or a little something that holds a digital album so it's not just hanging on a hook. We're like, oh, that's great. And Apple comes to me and says, hey, good news, we're going to put the Beatles on iTunes and this is what we're going to do. And I'm like, that's awesome. And for the first time ever, we're going to launch the entire world at the same time. And I'm like, well, that seems like it might be challenging. And we literally backed up 747s at the Minneapolis airport. So we have a conversation with FedEx and we say, hey, here's the deal. I can't tell you what I'm about to ship, but I can tell you that I'm going to need 747s to do it. And I'm going to need it Tuesday morning. And I'm going to start loading trucks on there at 10:01 a.m. after something happens. And they're just like, all right, dude, it's $400,000 a plane, whether you use them or not.
Whoa.
And I'm like, yeah, we're in. And so we do it and we make all these things. And then 10 o'clock, Steve makes the announcement. We've got the Beatles on iTunes and we're super excited and we're launching the whole world.
And so you're filling 747s with containers of stuff,
things,
of displays.
Yeah, we made like 10 different versions of this. Oh, Australia gets this, or Carphone Warehouse in Australia gets this, and Fnac in Paris gets this.
How do you deploy them on location?
Oh man, it was just a lot of chaos. I mean,
you're managing teams of people deploying something that's top secret.
Yes. Yeah, which is why you couldn't load the planes until he made the announcement. So part of what we did early on in our relationship with Apple, simply because it made us better for all of our clients, is we became a black partner for them.
Yeah.
So we're one of the few people in the world who can work on a product before it's announced. And in order to do that, actually, Monday of this week, Apple Security was there and they come through and they kick doors and they lift windows and they interview employees and they look at cameras. Is that camera online? You know, if that camera's online, you can't have it. Or, you know, how do you store your files? All of that kind of stuff.
How do you keep it buttoned up with people, like employees?
You just create a mindset of security.
Yeah.
And so everybody thinks about it.
Yeah, because it's literally it's a black ops.
It is
like
a black
nobody
ops.
can know about this. And it's what, for months in advance?
Sometimes for months. Yeah, sometimes for months in advance. You know, and other times, like when they're launching a new phone, we'll print all of this stuff for the new phone and we just keep it upside down in a locked room. And then once they make the announcement, we bring it out, finish it, send it.
Yeah.
You know, so some things we can do much faster than others. But
yeah.
but that was, for us, creating that mindset of security and creating that mindset of we say yes when others have to say no. You know, we're able to do things other people can't or won't.
And is that just because you have a higher tolerance for risk?
It's because the truth is, it's because at a young age, I was constantly trying to prove myself. Because once I've said yes, well, now I've said yes. Okay, I've built a table. What's next? Oh, now you want a bigger table? Got it.
You need 5,000 of them?
Right. I mean, and ultimately we ended up being in 52 countries, 22,000 doors just for Apple.
And that's just one of your customers.
That's just one of them. That's just one of them. Yeah.
I'm trying to wrap my head around all of the lessons that you had to have taken away from this.
Well, I mean, let's get down to what's really important. That's a fun story. And we've done well as a company, and Apple really helped us build the company that we wanted, which is all great. But at the end of the day, that's not what matters. What matters is, how did we show up inside of that? So we do that. We have a pretty good run with Apple. 2015, we sell the company. But in building that company, my grandfather would always say he loved Fridays, because on Fridays, all the dudes would be coming in with boats behind their trucks, and he would look at that, and it meant a couple of things. One, you probably have some loans, so you're not going to quit your job. And two, you have a life outside of here. You're going to a cabin, or you're going fishing with your buddies, or, you know, you have a certain quality of life that you're able to really enjoy. And that's what was important, you know? And so in the midst of my dysfunction and unhealed trauma, I accidentally built a big ass company. And I can say that now, and I don't feel bad about it. I can say that now looking back, but at the time, I'm just trying to prove to you that I'm good enough. Nobody sells Apple. Oh yeah? Well, certainly nobody can sell Apple and another tech company. Oh yeah? You know, and I'm going to the tops of Apple because you just weren't supposed to do that. And I'm like, hey, I need to talk to some of these other groups. And here's what I'll do. I'll set up different security, separate teams. No one will know what we're doing. They work out of this building. They work out of that building, whatever it is. So it doesn't matter which tech company you're talking about. If you're looking at one of their logos, I was probably involved. And the reason we ended up there is because that was a product that people wanted to support and usually needed you to experience. I mean, when the phone was launched in 2007, and someone said to Steve, they said, no one's going to buy a phone without buttons. Like, this is the dumbest thing. And Steve's like, no, this is what the industry needs. So if you're going to sell a phone without buttons, you can't just put it in a glass case and hope people understand it. You need to experience it. And that's been kind of the MO for Apple, is always the stuff that we build should be almost unnoticeable. It should be a support to what is the hero, which is the product. And so that was the mantra in which we used to build our company. So someone else comes in and Garmin comes in and they're like, well, security is a big thing for us. And we're like, oh, it's a big thing for you? Let's talk security. And next thing you know, we've got $4 million of live Garmin devices being sent in so we can pack their kits full before we send them out to the stores. But that was a result of gap in the market, willingness to fill that gap, and the ability to add value to it, and then just expanding that to other clients is ultimately what it was. And all of that, for me personally, all of that was done in the pursuit of, can I just be good enough? Like, at what point do I feel worthy? At what point when I walk in, I sat in a meeting, this was a long time ago, I sat in a meeting with a group of procurement people, and this group of procurement people was frustrated about not getting something done in time. And one of my people said, Jay, will you come to the meeting with me? I'm like, sure, I'm happy to come to the meeting. And I sit down at the meeting, and the lady looks across the table at me and she says, you know what? Jay said it could be done in 4 weeks. And I kind of stop and I'm like, oh, she doesn't know who I am. And I'm like, I'm Jay. And she's like, oh my gosh, I didn't know. I had no idea. I just, so-and-so told me that Jay had said that, and so, and at that point I realized to myself, I'm like, when I have a conversation at this level, it makes it to this level. And by the time it gets to this level, the daily operational level, one, they don't even know who Jay is. For all they know, Jay's an internal Apple guy. They don't know. But I sat in that meeting and I thought to myself, wow, they're using me against myself. And then my next thought is, man, if they only knew what an imposter I am. Like, the fact that I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm not good enough to be sitting in this seat. But yet you're using me against myself. I'm some kind of internal barometer at the world's largest company. But it doesn't register for me. And again, we got through it and it was fine and we got the job done, but that's what lands for me. So that's what I'm fighting. I'm not fighting. I could not tell you within 200% of what I make a year from 2005 to 2015. I have no idea, not even close. And I can tell you that I'm not even close because my therapist had me go back and look at a couple of 14 and 15 to see what it was so I could ground myself in that reality. And I was shocked at the amount of money. Shocked. And shocked not because, oh my gosh, that's big money, but shocked because you make that amount of money and you feel like this. And that's really the moment for me where I'm like, oh, I've lived on the streets and had very little. And I've flown around in my own jet with a couple teams of pilots, and neither of those fulfilled me. Neither of those defined me. And when you've had the opportunity to have the experience on both ends of the spectrum, you don't sit in the middle saying, boy, if I just had a little bigger house, if I had just a little faster car, if my kids had a little nicer clothes. No. There's no incremental change that's going to bring self-worth. Because I've been on both ends of the spectrum. And to be honest, if you are a happy, joyous, and free person with good mental health, be rich. It's more fun. But it doesn't define you and it doesn't bring happiness. And so that's what this is what I learned now looking back at it. But in the middle of it, I'm just trying to grow. I'm just trying to build a bigger business. I'm trying to do more cool things. I want to build more great things out in the world.
You said you didn't feel worthy. Do you feel worthy now?
More often than I don't. I still think that it's something that happens over time. I am far more comfortable with myself now than I was back then. My daughter, I have a 32-year-old daughter. Oh, maybe I shouldn't give you her age. She might be angry. But I have a 32-year-old daughter who now runs process displays. My brother and I are still there, and we show up, and my brother Mike does a lot of heavy lifting, but she's the one. And she said to me the other day, she said, I'm so proud to have a dad that does the work. Not, I'm so proud that you built this massive company. I'm so proud that you've been able to sustain the Apple relationship. I'm so proud of the life that you gave us. None of that. It was, I'm so proud to have a dad that's willing to do the work. And for me, those are the moments where I stop and say, yeah, do I walk into a room sometimes and still have that kind of internal, I feel a little bit small? Yeah, sometimes it happens, but I catch it now. And so what used to happen is I walk into a room and I feel a little bit small. Well, I've got two options. I'm going to go big and you're going to know I'm here, or I'm going to go real small and I'm going to be able to make you kind of feel bad for me and you're going to reach out to me. Like those are my two options when I feel small. And sometimes they go well and other times they're just, a huge disaster. But I know that now. Doesn't mean that I don't still walk into a room sometimes and feel small. And when I'm doing well, I'll stop afterwards and say, what happened there that made me feel small? What was it that clicked inside of me, that triggered me to feel small and like I had to compensate for that? I wasn't aware of that when I was younger. So I would walk into a room and feel small, and then I would take over. And that's what I did over and over and over again, whether it was at my company, out on the floor, or in front of a client. That's what I did.
You mentioned your therapist. It sounds like you've done a lot of work on yourself.
I have, and I had the good fortune of, when you, I don't know, second grade maybe or something like that, and your first day of school, I realize now why they do it, but back then you're like, who cares? But second grade, hey, what was your favorite thing that you did this summer? And what scared you the most this summer? And when you write down what scared you the most, you write down one of your parents, then social services gets involved. So I've had counseling therapists in my life from a very young age. So it's never scared me. It's never felt like something that was wrong or off. I haven't had a lot of great therapists. I have great therapists in later years of my life. But it's important to me simply because I've seen what is possible with the right intention. And I know that if I'm trying to create self-worth for myself, or I'm in pursuit of the world's best Instagram post, those aren't the right intentions. And if more of the world, if more leaders stepped in with the right intentions, the world changes. It's a ripple effect that runs through and changes. So when I look at this, and I say this to my kids, they all have good therapists. If you show me an Olympic athlete standing on the podium who got there without a coach, then I will not bother you to have a therapist. But as long as these people at the height of their sport, the best of the best, realize that they need help to stay there or get even further, then why wouldn't you focus on your mental well-being? Why wouldn't you focus on the greatest power you have, which is you inside of you? So yeah, for me, it's a big deal. And I focus on that a lot. And it's given me a ton of breakthroughs. And I still need real world application of that stuff. I have a great therapist, but didn't truly understand that someone could love you through bad mistakes until my wife showed me. Until I looked at it and I was like, oh, wow, like you're still here? And I think that that's, for me, And I say this to everyone. I'm like, you should have a great tax person, you should have a great lawyer, and you should have a great therapist. And those three things are going to allow you to navigate a bunch. And at certain points in your life, when you think, no, I just need a great tax person and a great lawyer, because look at all these acquisitions I'm doing, you're missing part of that. Might not feel like you're missing it because you're making more money and people think you're doing great and you're living the life of your dreams, but there's more to it. Because at the end of the day, and this is what I say to my kids at work now, the opportunity with process displays is not that it will make you a lot of money and give you a bunch of notoriety and put you in the room with the greatest brands in the world. All of those things can happen. But the greatest opportunity here is the ability to impact 350 lives on a daily basis. You get to create a space of belonging for these people. And when you do that, because we like to think that we can compartmentalize and I'm one way at work and I'm another way over here. No, you're not. You're one way. You may lean more one way or the other, but you're one way. And one of them is going to land more disingenuous than the other. And so when we have the ability to say, what creates belonging? Well, part of creating belonging is a sense of shared values. Great. What are our shared values? We build cool shit. We say yes when others have to say no. We're willing to take on and do things that seem impossible. There's some shared values and some pride in the work that we do, and we all step in to do it. So I have this kind of first box checked on the ability to create a space of belonging. Now, if I make sure I don't make it personal, if something goes wrong and you're building it and I'm like, Charles, why did you do that? This is unacceptable. I've now made it personal and you're upset. But if I can look at it and say, Charles, this didn't work out the way we wanted. What else do you think we could do to make this thing go? Now the company has a problem and the company's showing up in support. So now I've given you a place where you're supported. And this is the opportunity. And I find that when you focus on those things, the money will come. But if you sit your team down at the end of the year and you say, this is our sales goal, we're going to do $200 million this year, and here's how we're going to get there, and here's what it looks like when we get there. Then everybody in that meeting has a number in mind. And you want to get to a number, most people become transactional. I got to get to 200 million. I got to get to 200 million. If you sit down and you say, hey, here's the opportunity. I want to make sure that we've done everything in our company so you've created a space of belonging for the people before you and after you in the supply chain. And our chief growth officer had this great thing. I don't know anything about volleyball. It's not my sport. But he said, one of the things that you always do is you better the ball. That's your job. So if you're the person in the corner and someone hits a bad pass to you and you're not able to just put it up for the person to spike, your job is to, however the ball gets to you, put it in a better position for the person after you. And if you do that enough, at some point when it gets to that last person, the ball's in a pretty good position. So if you remember that in the work that we do, hey guys, our job is to better the ball. I'm going to take whatever came to me and I'm going to make sure it's in a better place when I give it to the person next to me because I care about these people. When you do that and when your people feel supported, you get better work. You get more of it and you get better work. And when that's what you're focused on, the number goes up. I never set out to sell a certain amount of money. I never set out to be a salesperson that did 10 million. I think the industry average back, in the last 10 years is probably, a really good salesperson probably does 10 million, and that you're really killing it. You're doing a lot of work and that's great. In 2015, I did 140 million myself. And it was not because I set out to do 140 million, but because I set out to show up in support of Apple, to be able to service them and support them in the best way possible. And then I had in my heart that I want to give my people the opportunity to just build cool stuff, to just do cool. And I've got your back. You build it, I'll sell it. Don't worry about that, but let's just do great things, and that brought the number to where we wanted it to be. Now, sales numbers are important. Of course, you want to know what the goals are. I mean, you want to be able to have done all that stuff because you know the thresholds you want to hit. So I'm not saying that that isn't important, but when you lead to the company with a number, then the company's chasing a number. We're now transactional. When you lead to the company with what a relationship should look like, what people should feel like when they're here at work, and be clear, we're not therapists. We're not here to heal the people that work for us. If that happens, great. But we're here to show up and support in a way that we know can be healing based on our experiences. But that doesn't mean that you still don't have to fire people. You still don't have to hold people accountable, but it's like when someone says to you, I'm doing this for your own good. When your parents, I really love you and I'm doing this for your own good. You know what? If you have to say that to me, you're not connecting the dots. You're not showing up as a person who would do something for my own good. So think about the way you're showing up. Think about the intentions with which you have.
The intention is, I wrote that down because I think the right intentions are I think those are what make success. You had said something about measuring just money, but I think fortune and happiness and all that, I think it comes from intent. That's so powerful.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you.
We could talk for 3 more hours. I want to have you back because I want to hear more about the latter half of your story. We've run out of time because we've hit so much gold today, but I want you to come back because I want to follow up on the sale of the business, and I want to talk more about all of that. Before we finish, I have 2 questions for you. The first one, and we'll just start with this one, is if everything you ever said or wrote or tweeted or emailed or text disappeared overnight and you could leave the world with one idea, what would it be?
I mean, ultimately, in its simplest form, be curious. Be curious. And I don't want to sound like Ted Lasso because Apple's a big client, but ultimately what I've found is as long as I'm interested in understanding why you're reacting the way you're reacting, as long as I stay curious to that, I can be helpful. It's when I want to judge, oh, wait, you're of that political party? Then you must think this and you do that. As long as you stay curious, there's an opportunity there. And that for me is the biggest thing.
Wow. I think curiosity is so powerful. I mean, I find that the most successful people I know are curious.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. And I learned early on, there was a guy at Apple, ran a huge organization at Apple, and he would come into these meetings. He would come out to my facility, way above the pay grade of people who should be coming to my facility. And he took more notes than anybody, constantly taking notes. And I went over to him one time and I'm like, Mike, why do you take so many notes? And he's like, you know what, Jay, I've been in a lot of meetings and I've been with a lot of powerful people. And I notice the smartest people take the most notes. And I'm like, amen. I bought a notebook and I've had it ever since. But you're right. Because he's curious. He wants to know.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to take this information and then I'm going to show you that I'm curious about you. Not only are you going to say something, but I'm going to write it down, which then validates that I think what you said is important. Yeah.
Okay. Lastly, when the lights go out and your time's done, what do you want to be known for, remembered for?
I would love to be remembered as a person who supported people to be the most powerful version of themselves. That's ultimately starting with my kids and expanding out from there. But I want to be the guy that was speaking life into you when you were at a crossroads. I want to be the person where you look and say, boy, he really supported me. He really had my back. And that's at the end of the day, I think the greatest thing that I can do with the life that I've been given, with the hurdles I've cleared, with the ones I've tripped over. The greatest thing I can do is to help you. And not because I'm further along or smarter. It happens via sharing like we're doing here. And I should have given you the disclaimer, take everything I say with a grain of salt. Yeah, it's real and it's my life.
I think I'm going to take it a little more than a grain of salt.
But it might not work for you, but it works for me.
Yeah.
And so for me, I want to be known as the guy who just supported and empowered people to be the most powerful versions of themselves.
You've done that for me since the day I met you.
Well, you're an easy man to do that for.
Thank you. Jay, it's great to have you. Come back.
I will.
Thanks for joining me.
Thank you very much.
Hey, if you like this episode, make sure you subscribe, share it with somebody you like, and of course, make sure you check out my company, Eide. We produce conferences and events all over the US, and if you know of a conference or an event that's looking for the best company in the business, check out eidecom.com.